Hello, welcome back. I am the host, and thus I have to say the first words. Welcome back. We're getting into Elazer versus Harstem, a ZVP, the only non-Zerg Protoss, all alone against the Zerg Tide. What do you think about this one?
This is a fun one. I actually like watching Harstem stream a lot, and Elazer, I'm trying to remember, I think it was customs. I was going to say it's either they were unwitting training partners or they select each other. I think they actually did. It's before this bracket, of course, because that would make a whole lot of sense. But Harstem and Elazer played a whole bunch. They were really cool games. Harstem won a lot of them, but that was just practice. It was fun, though.
Yeah, Harstem went through a grueling PvZ gauntlet to even get to Challenger through the open qualifier number 2, I want to say, something like that. So he's already pretty well-suited for this group, and it is that classic, well, he's the only Protoss who only has to prepare for one matchup. That's going to be best, right? I mean, maybe. But I do feel like Harstem, as a European Protoss, must already have to feel comfortable against Zerg, and while this is a tough group, I can see him getting out second. I think everyone's still going for Cyril first.
I do think, yeah, it still is that kind of simple math where, yes, Cyril's tripped up, but he's tripped up in, the finals of the biggest tournaments, so it's or close to it at least. So it's not been that alarming, but you've got Nurchio, who I think is pretty beatable, and then it's interesting you pick Harstem over Elazer. I mean, I feel like it does come down to these two, but that would be really bad for Elazer. He had a disappointing winner.
Yes, he did. But it's actually I feel like Elazer will get out second. I think that's the safer choice, but it is one of those things also where I feel like Elazer could even be the one to ZVZ snipe Cyril in the early to mid game. So I'd give him the better chance of getting out, yes, but I think that Harstem is totally capable of it, and I do think that he's got to come in here prepared with some very good builds. You do get that prep time, at least the first series, something that you know. Second series, you could probably guess, with Cyril being in the first series. So, yeah, Harstem should be well prepared for this, and I feel like eventually it's got to be the year of Harstem, right? That's got to start sometime.
Again.
Yes, exactly.
He's won a Home Story Cup. He's pretty good. This will be a good one, though. Elazer versus Harstem. Like I said, both these players help each other out and train. But I'm telling you, it didn't happen the second these groups were announced, because this is a knife fight. Everybody really wants to get through Challenger, get out, get to Kiev, and fight for the big bucks and the big points. Exactly.
We are into the first map in the bottom right. As the red Zerg, it is Elazer.
And his opponent, the top left-hand side, the captain himself from the Netherlands. It's the Dutchman, Harstem.
Fighting for a lot of money, some points to get up there, but also for that seed directly into Kiev to be a spring later in late May, I believe it is.
Yeah, I think it's May 17th or something like that.
Around there, I guess. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, should be an exciting event. There is also going to be an open bracket there for, if maybe you're missing some of your favorite players, oh no, they're not going to be able to go. Well, actually, a lot of the Europeans probably still going to go. I don't know about North Americans, which will be later today, and they will definitely be fighting over those seeds, but yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'll probably have a little bit more of an Eastern European feel. There's a lot of really strong Russian and Ukrainian players. We don't get to see in WCS as much. This is kind of a topic of discussion for a little while now. The European scene is crowded, right? There's more full-time StarCraft players in Europe than there are spots in Challenger.
Yeah.
It's a pretty awesome stat for us as fans of the game, of course, but very intimidating and scary for these pro gamers. And then even behind that, you have very good players that perform well on the ladder and do compete in WCS and attempt to make Challenger that you don't even regard as pro gamers. If you ever watched a Muslim stream, he talks about himself as if he's a streamer, just a casual 6,300 MMR streamer.
Exactly. And caster now.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Let's call that too.
Yeah. Yeah, he's pretty darn good. But exactly, if you actually watch the qualifiers for this, there's kind of those guaranteed people. Maybe they get the first 4 spots, but then the other 4 are just well, there's 20 people left that could probably get this. Yeah. It is a challenge, but we also had people that were already seated in here, and of course the ladder race that did happen as well. Which one of the players in this group? Nurchio? Was he the one that got that? No, actually he went through the open qualifier too. I don't know if anyone had. Cyril's obviously seated in.
Yeah.
Anyways, Harstem versus Elazer starting off pretty normal. We have an Adept into a Stargate. Nothing of note in this game.
Yeah, the Stargate's not part of the wall-in, which is your first kind of interesting note here. And Harstem does mix it up. Some players are just no, I do Stargate every single game. Everyone knows that. That's fine. But Harstem will do some pretty cheeky builds. He's not afraid to hit a timing or two. And it's really fun to watch him stream it because he gives his thoughts on it, and you get inside the mind of a performing top-tier pro gamer in that European scene. And he'll talk, especially about his matchup against Elazer. He would make some of these pushes and be like, oh, I thought Elazer wouldn't be able to defend that. I didn't think he'd have enough drones, that kind of stuff. So the early game is important. Talks a lot about how this Adept has to show up immediately, get this information, and threaten economic damage.
Yeah. Yeah, but get information as a Elazer. I mean, I'm not saying that any Zerg player really is prone to going for like a banling bust. Basically, would be happening
right
around that time the Adept's supposed to scout it, but it's not too common. Like, it's definitely doable, especially when you have that quote unquote second life in a style of tournaments. But nope, that's all above board. I mean, delayed speed is kind of like the interesting note. We do have a immediate follow up into a Robo for the Protoss, and actually immediately into the additional gases.
Yeah, this should be an Archon drop. Something that he still goes for. This map is pretty good for Protoss in the sense that third base is fairly defensible, so a lot of times if you have to get to that low ground, if the Archon drop stage of the game doesn't go very well, that can be very sticky and tough to take, and sometimes Zergs will key in on that.
Huh. Okay, Elazer actually did not have any Spore Crawlers built.
Yeah, he's got a lot of queens, so he's relying on that. And only 2 drones die, which I know sounds weird, because any drones dying is supposed to be really... Oh my god!
Oh.
Come on!
Oh no. And that was without a Spore Crawler attacking him in the natural.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
That really turned on him, because that was a wide, like, I mean, obviously the Oracle's not going to get like a ton of damage ever as long as there's a queen there,
right.
but that was kind of like a best case scenario as far as like professional PvZ goes. Usually those Spore Crawler timings, the queen timings, they buddy up with each other are so perfect, and yet he loses the Oracle straight up. So missing that vision. I mean, he'll have some with the Archon drop, right? Like attacking while some scouting, but it's just not as easy as casting Revelation from that Oracle.
So the Robo's not spotted, but the Overlord did see the Warp Prism. Now, of course, there's 2 different varieties. There's the DT Archon drop, and then there is going to be the Templar Archon drop. We can see that it is the Templar Archives this time around. This Warp Prism, no, okay. But this is trouble. So it's only just the one, and he does not want to spin the Warpins here. So these Warpins are not Templar. So at first glance, you look at this and say, well, the Lings should just die, right? And then the Zealots are worth it. Kind of. You just delayed the entire Archon drop by a full Warpin, and that's a big deal, a real big deal.
Yeah, exactly. Now, luckily, Harstem put it in a really nice location so that if there were more Lings or Roaches already ready to try and search for that, they'd probably still be able to morph in. And they're not even being found, actually. Really nice, clever spot there. But that was a big delay. That does mean that we have not just 5 Roaches, but I think like up to 11 ready to go, ready to split. Because, again, he doesn't quite know where exactly the Warp Prism's coming in, but he could probably guess. He saw it on the left side. It still is the left side. Now just being used for creep removal is not a bad use of the Archons at all, and actually the Roach is a little out of position. He's going to find an Overlord, it looks like, too.
Yeah. And, remember, too, we saw that the defense for the initial Oracle was just kind of mass queens. That means those queens still exist, and this Warp Prism could be in danger, but it's actually going to pull back super safely, and at the end of the day, it just gets some creep tumors killed. And I think this is in part because of that little bit of Ling harass kind of occupying his attention. If you lose the Warp Prism now, it's like it's pretty darn close to game over. You just almost get out of the game.
It's pretty bad. You would have like no scouting on the map either, which is really important in this game as you do have +1 melee on the way. Okay, swapping over. We also have that Spire being pretty quick, and just being here in general is going to be a big surprise unless Harstem actually sees it, which I'm going to guess it's in the main base. Oh, speaking of that, Ling's in the main base of Harstem getting a couple of probes worth of damage and just being a general nuisance, so he can't micro the Warp Prism as much as he wants to.
I'll tell you what. So far losing the Oracle, of course, sucks, but the game just feels rough right now for Harstem. It just is not quite going his way. And as Zombie Grove just pointed out, the Spire is just not scouted. So that's one of the things with Archon drop. You'll usually see this, or you throw hallucinations out or something, but it just isn't. It's just not even known. So when these mutas show up against an army that typically is like 3 sentries, charge lot, Archon, maybe a couple of Archons from the initial Warp Prism, and then Immortals, that's not a great anti-muta army. And if the mutas show up at the middle line, okay, so this scout is so important. Oh, I don't think it makes it.
It's not going to happen. No, that was really close, but it does. It did see it. Well, this one definitely.
Okay, that one certainly does.
but still, it's already done. It says the mutas are about halfway out. I mean, it is important, though. It's better than seeing them as they pop up in your natural. There's no defense whatsoever. But now you can get shield batteries and a cannon, and that does hold against anything less than like 10 mutas, right? Which it's 9 right now. So that is very important. That could have been much, much worse.
Yeah. I think it's perfect for Harstem.
Yeah.
He's actually warping in the cans the latest time possible. It shifts gears for Elazer as well. If that goes unscouted, there's a chance that he shows up with like 20 mutas. I know that's a little bit crazy, but why not? But in this case, he's just going to make the 9. They're going to show up. The cannons will finish. There are going to be a few Phoenix out. And what could have been disastrous ends up being pretty okay, I think, for Harstem. We don't know just yet, but I think so.
I think so as well. I think it's going to be all right. Now, he was already playing like a macro style, right, defensive. He didn't even try to move out, and then the mutas would have stopped that in his tracks. So he's going to be prepared, I think, for the follow-up attack. Now, again, +1 melee is done. +2 not so much, so probes aren't in like terrible, terrible danger quite yet. But it is an army from Elazer that probably even could be maxed out as it moves in here. Going to target fire the High Templar to try to, but they're actually pretty well defended.
Yeah. Shield batters right there make their damage pretty unimportant. These are slow bailings for the time being, so yeah, in 10 seconds they'll become something completely different. The Phoenix can actually just straight up win the air battle here pretty soon. So they're going to harass this quite a bit. Now, Harstem's had time to set up, and this attack looked scary. But if it wants to try to go up this ramp with Storm and Archon spread out, I don't see the success. And all of a sudden, I think Harstem's in a pretty darn good spot. Getting to the low ground is going to be a bit of a chore. But by winning the air battle and looking at this army, it gets worse over time, by the way, right? Like, the Storms hitting those Banelings and Lings really does a number here.
Yeah, you know, there's that time when you have Storm and you feel like a little comfortable, but your army's not very big. And a lot of Archons, Mortals, whatever, there to shield them. But I mean, Harstem actually is going to grab a 4th base as he sees the army move away, but he didn't have to. If that army was still there and he was still a little nervous, like, he probably could have waited till more, 170 supply. I mean, rather safe against this type of army. Now, Elazer knows that army is also running out of steam very quickly, so he's already added on his Infestation Pit. He is going up the Hive, adding on Hydras, but that's going to be a little while before he actually has a good army against what Harstem has. And Harstem, not just expanding, could maybe also try and control the map a little, but he's still focused more on that late game macro, so if Fleet Beacon comes down.
And the timing of this Fleet Beacon is really, really savage. He's got this Observer in here cheating kind of as well, seeing the Hive timing. But this map has, like, this is the harder to take base for the Protoss player. The straight up 12 o'clock base, right outside the ramp of that 3rd, is a little bit easier to defend. But if you can take this middle base now, which is like pre-Hive tech, the real scary Zerg army timing, and then allow yourself to have the easier 5th base to take, this map becomes a 5-base Protoss map, which is really, really good. Yeah,
we could be in for another long first game here. And you guys had that pretty cool ZVZ. But Harstem not being aggressive, not willing to throw any chances away by being out in the middle of a map and being surrounded, because that's when Elazer's army is actually still pretty decent. He's just staying at home, waiting for that Fleet Beacon tech. So whether it's Tempest or Carriers, okay, the Phoenix die. That's unfortunate. They are actually the only, well, besides the Observer in the main, I suppose, which is still cheating. There's not much else for map presence for Harstem. They both done away with the harassment that they try to send toward each other.
And he sees double Spire. This is such a funny StarCraft thing, right? So we as StarCraft players are really OCD about building plays, or at least a lot of us are. And he literally puts the 2nd Spire next to the 1st one, which tells Harstem incredible information. He's like, well, you're super committed to Stargate, or not Stargate, excuse me, but Air Tech. So it still hasn't happened for Harstem yet. He hasn't added the additional Stargates because he's being really conservative about his investment into that. But once he clicks over and sees the Observer showing what it sees,
okay, that Warp Prism snuck right behind there and is going to go straight to the Greater Spire. That is dead. The 2nd Spire could also be dead, completely resetting that technology. Elazer is still pretty dependent on that. That's a big loss, and even uses his Banelings on his Hive accidentally. Elazer finally take away that Observer. That's great. And the 2nd Spire actually didn't die. That is surprising. I thought for sure that was going to be targeted down.
It's like a full reset, right? And it's low in health. So there's actually nothing that can kill his Warp Prism until that Spire finishes.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Well,
I guess
really good move.
If he was really bothered by it, he could make a Viper, I suppose. But
fair.
Yeah, that is a big delay. But Harstem, again, not looking for any openings, just trying to get some harassment out here. These run-bys actually aren't working for either player so far. They're very good about, I guess they both have the same idea, right? So they're catching each other's.
Yeah. The remaking of the Phoenix was really speculative. very weird. Like he definitely he saw a Greater Spire morphing, so I don't think you know, it's kind of weird to me because it's like you can't think that there's going to be mass meter showing up. But anyways, it's neither here nor there. He's going to move out with this very Archon heavy army, which against a mostly Ling Baneling composition is fantastic. Now that being said, 9 Infestors along the way. They're not going to have that much energy. The upgrade for their energy will finish before that. So they will have some access to it, but
yeah,
it's weird. The Fungals will be strong here.
Well, the Fungals will just literally, they're great at buying time. And that's what they're going to try and do here, because this army is just direct. It's just, I don't see how Elazer's army actually beats this. It's just, you can't really get to the heart of the storms, especially if he's coming in from one angle. And there's a mothership. There are Spore Crawlers, so that's not such a problem, but there are those Fungals.
Elazer's army is way strong. And the Storm's the big issue here, but Hydras with Archons that are just stuck in space. This army it's so weird by Harstem to go that heavy on Archons, but the harass is amazing. He gets the Spire in the background. The Natural's getting trashed, or was. It's going to get cleaned up here, but the main is in some order of disarray.
Yeah, the Fungals ended up working out perfectly, really, for that situation. The Spore Crawlers as well, all being made and moved to the front line so that Mothership couldn't even try and instigate and get over there. Like, that was nice. The War Prism goes down as well, so minimal harassment damage, I guess, from that one, is considering how much was actually put in there. Well, to the Spire.
These Spire snipes are what's keeping Harstem in this. Another weird choice is he's not taking a 5th behind any of this at all. He's going to find that, which is cool. But, like, take the 5th. Start securing a base or something, because, you know, 4-base economy is great, but his main and natural are drying up. The 3rd's getting thin. And a couple more bad fights like that with Fungals holding his army in place and a bunch of Hydras just wailing on him, it's going to get real ugly.
He is going into Tempest, which, I mean, should help. He's trying to get the Storms on the front line, but they do clump up awfully, so that the Fungal is going to be dangerous to the High Templars. But these Archons really aren't on, they're not capable of getting close to the army, but Harstem's going to try and push through it. I mean, he could be looking for feedbacks as well, but it is a very dangerous game to play.
Those Banelings should not make it, but here's the big fight. A lot of the Storm's pretty ineffective. They're like thinning out the health of the Infestors. Baneling's trying to go for the center mass. They go right into the meat grinder that is those Archons. And now fighting here, it is actually looking pretty good for Harstem. Big warp in behind this. Archon's getting low in health though, right? Yeah,
the Archons, I mean, they're great against Banelings, but that was, as far as that goes, effective Baneling usage. More Fungals on the Zealots, so they don't actually end up getting those last swipes on the Infestors. And Elazer ends up holding, takes out the Mothership as well. As two more Storms left over, but are there enough Warp-ins to actually push through? No, there are not. Hydra's even coming from the backside, and that is actually it. Elazer. Fantastic use of Infestors to buy time, despite how often Harstem was taking on the Greater Spire, and even end up being about that Greater Spire.
Yeah. Well, every time the Greater Spire finished, it would just die a few seconds later, but the army composition of Elazer, it cannot be said enough, is really, really strong. It's actually tough to make that an aggressive army when you're pushing forward with Infestors, landing Fungals. Obviously, it's still very doable, but it just ends up being that more of them get feedback, they're sniped, and you're off creep, so it's just a little bit more difficult to execute, but specifically when fighting amongst Spore Crawlers and you got Banelings on creep and your Hydras have a full concave, that army is a defensive nightmare for the Protoss. So I was talking about Harstem's composition. We can see this kind of big engagement right here. I don't like the composition, but there's not many compositions that make this fight that much better for Protoss either.
Yeah, I feel like you would have to have had, 20 Zealots in reserve coming from the back and then the Warp-in from the front as well. But that actually was not enough supply there to even do that. There was too much in the Archons, which you don't see that type of army unless the Fungals are there, unless you're on creep, unless everything goes, somewhat your way, work out well against what is still a layer tech army, right? Baneling, Hydra, Ling. Archons just, they're going to blow past that. But the Fungals were exactly what was needed. And defensively, as you said, that was a really good point. Defensively, Elazer was okay. So Harstem, I feel like that was kind of a game where I felt like Harstem actually had many openings. Yeah. And he never took them until Elazer was actually prepared. And those Fungals actually came at a very tight timing.
Yes.
Like, it was close.
Yeah, and it was also Elazer that was kind of being pushed into a corner, right? Like, he didn't have, as far as I remember, there was not really a 5th base. At least there wasn't one saturated. So they were on equal-ish bases. Again, if there was a 5th base, it wasn't saturated for the most part, as far as I remember. And that's usually very favorable for the Protoss, but specifically taking these really expensive fights on creep and not expanding behind it for Harstem was kind of the tipping point. The harass was great, the fight was bad, and then not having economy behind that was rough.
Yeah. I guess Harstem also felt maybe a little overconfident with the type of army he was showing. But the positioning he was pushing into is also favorable, even if there weren't fungals. Like it's a huge concave for the Zerg. But as I said, I felt like there was moments earlier, he was at a decent supply. That game was actually kind of passive, all things considered. Elazer decided not to go for that big push with the Ravager baneling, and that was the smart call. The Mutas ended up doing something, but not a lot. But anyways, Harstem actually got to a decent army supply.
Very
the type
good.
of army supply and the type of army that can actually kind of bully the map a little bit. And he never did.
I agree.
He went with Fleet Beacon and Tempest, and then Elazer had time to kind of consider and rethink his plans as his Greater Spires kept dying, and he was like, you know what?
Yeah.
Festers. It's good.
Well, this is one of those rare games, though, where literally Harstem taps out after losing a fight on Elazer's side of the map, and you don't see that as much, and it's not because, well, I mean, let's just deal with what it literally is. Usually these guys kind of dial into a winning situation, so if you lose attacking with your economy mostly intact behind that, you were way off base. So Harstem's got time to adjust, and this is something that Zombie Grub talked about earlier. You kind of have a second life. This is still a live best of 3. You can still drag this back. But even if he should lose this, he'll go on to face Nurchia, who I would say is a very good player, but probably a lesser ZVP player than Elazer right now.
Agreed. We are on to Automaton in the bottom left. Up 1, he is the Red Zerg, Elazer.
And in the, what are we going to call this? The top right-hand side.
Yeah.
The 2 o'clock position, if you will. It's the Dutchman, Mr. Harstem.
Automaton has the weirdest map positions
Yeah.
of any map I think we've had. It's not quite 2, but, like 145-ish, something like that.
Good map, though. I like it.
I mean, all the maps in this map pool have been good. This is the least amount of complaints I've heard from a map pool, I think, in a while.
And that is how we measure it in StarCraft, is off the complaints.
Yes. I mean, for tournament organizer, you also are like, it's very apparent when they just pick the same 3 maps.
Quiet. They must be happy.
That's exactly how it goes. So, Year 0 has been kind of the, it's a scary map because of how big it is for a lot of different play styles, and the different races might prefer it or whatever, but it gives us a ton of really great series, great map games. I know Super Tournament, it's actually been kind of the highlight map, but anyways, every other map has been good so far.
Yeah.
And Automaton is no different. It's a little more of the interesting one as far as the map pool goes again. Like, it has that gold base in the middle with the, some Terrans like that just take the 4th base without the gases because they can.
Yeah.
Zergs have some cheeses still based off gold bases, although those are really only rampant when, like, Overgrowth was still in. Right? That was
It's one of the best gold bases I've ever seen on a map, because you have to hit this weird balance where the Terran, it's not worth it for them to just literally pick up their main and go there and start with that.
Yeah.
Which does not happen. That if you're like, Jeff, what are you talking about? That's a thing, guys. We actually used to deal with that, where Terrans would start the game by floating their base over to a gold and then just have a gold base as their main base. I always liked the gold mechanic in theory, but we had a lot of maps that it was just too favored to one race or another in a matchup, and it was just kind of bad. But on this map in particular, yeah, I really agree. It's great.
Yep. So the probe's finally going to be shooed away here by the Lings. It's a Elazer, once again, delaying speed. Since he's got 100 gas, not going to use it. Harstem goes for a Robo first this time. And this is really...
Very fast Robo.
I mean, like a year ago, I feel like, Robo first was 15-20% of the ZVP. Stargate was still very dominant, but it's really changed up in part because of Nidus Storm and also just, how the meta changes. So I know Harstem actually has a build around, I think it's a Robo first, that's just like... It's actually charge a lot harassment, and he goes into a macro game. So it's kind of interesting. It's given us a lot of options as an opener.
It is so fast. It's going to finish here. It might also be this immortal thing that he does. No, it's going to be straight War Prism. Never mind. And I saw him practice this build as well. And it is... The nice thing about it is it's a Swiss Army knife of an opening. So you talked about a speed lot opening, or charge lot, excuse me. Yes. That is one of the routes you can take it. You can also just do like a 3 or 4 sentry, a few stalker push, and you just keep warping in on top of this, and it snowballs a little bit, right? Like, no, it doesn't have 8 gateways behind it, but it has 3 or 4, and they just keep warping in.
Yeah. People kind of scoffed at like stalker harassment. Stats showed it, but it actually can do quite a bit, especially if your opponent is the type to depend on roaches and think like, oh, I'm all good, roaches are great. Stalkers are actually be able to kite them around with that Warp Prism, but we're waiting on see what Harstem's going to do with it. The Twilight Council has completed here, but he's not actually using it quite yet.
See if he's going to add a Temple Archives or something. Yeah. Because here's the other thing too, and I don't want to harp too much on this because it may or may not be relevant, but he has shown this kind of opening to Elazer before in their practice. I literally watched it. So he might actually be showing that early Warp Prism to snipe that Overlord, to be like, hey, this could be that one of those 2 builds you helped me practice. And it ends up just being a normal Archon drop with economy behind it.
And that's what it's turning into with some very light Adept harassment, but you just need 2 Adepts to one-shot a drone, and there is a lot of space on Automaton's main. So he could even like try and curve around that Spore Crawler, but actually going to go ahead and just sacrifice his 2 Adepts, it looks like. They're going to the natural, but, well, there's actually not a lot of the natural, so sacrifice, yes, but for a decent amount of drones.
Yes. 6, probably 7 drones here. He does deny that, but 6 drones for 2 Adepts, absolutely fantastic. Let us not forget, too, that he did scout everything out. So just a very, very good opening from Harstem. Now, of course, this does signify to Elazer that it's not going to be any of those timing attacks that he has seen in the past. You do not spend that amount of time warping in and doing that without moving across the map. So it's just going to be an Archon drop behind it. Very safe opening from Harstem.
Yeah, Elazer looked like he was thinking about doing something, but realized perhaps that's not the best idea, or just simply misclicked, because those units do need to come back to defend against the Archons. Queens themselves, well, yeah, they're doing what they're supposed to target fire the Warp Prism, but they need a little protection. And now the drones need protection. They're actually being crowded into space they can't retreat from. The Archons, are they going to go for it? It's juicy, but then the Warp Prism has to dive so deep for it.
Oh my god, yeah, he's way in there. He's getting some kills, but that Warp Prism, whoa, does get out. Yeah, these guys, by the way. So it is Harstem 0-1, by the way. When he dives in deep like that, it's not just it's not just a risky move. It's like the entire series is based off of that aggression. But these guys are fearless, and Harstem's going to do it. And it ends up paying off. He actually doesn't even lose that much health on the Warp Prism. It's mostly shield, so he can get it back here pretty soon.
Well, he could bully the Queens just enough, and that Spore Crawler was in a position he knew about because of the earlier scouting. So, I mean, I'm not saying that he was like planning like 50 steps in advance, but it ended up working quite nicely. The Spore Crawler was in the actual mineral line, and that's very different.
Yeah.
So nice. So that's controlling the game a little bit here, as Elazer just is going into those pure roaches. No +1 melee, no sneaky spire. We got missile and roach speed, and Harstem adds on everything we expect from a Protoss. +1 charge on the mortals.
And he's got to be feeling good about this. All this action has kept Elazer pretty firmly on his half the map. What, Nidus?
No, we just have that typical, like, second Templar Archive, second Armory. Like, kind of forgetting that too. That was what your build was around, and you were like, oh, it's the timing I need to get it.
And you already got
Not so
that.
much. It's an expensive building,
too. 5 more drones die. Harstem is close in supply, but ahead in workers, which is pretty rare for a Protoss at this stage. Things are going well for you if you're up in workers here.
That actually is not just a waste of minerals and gas, but it's also maybe delaying his storm.
Yeah. It's funny because he's actually warping in Templar. I think he canceled it, though.
Did he?
Yeah,
Somebody
he
also.
realized.
Okay, that was fairly close to finishing. Okay. Good stuff. He is actually not going into storm, as he realized he already has it. He doesn't just immediately start it. He does have enough gas for it, but he has been morphing them all into Archons. He's also still getting like all of his gases taken to the third, and just really focusing on this Warp Prism harassment. Where did it?
It recalled back.
Our observer lost it too. There you go.
It's back at home, my man. And now, like I said, this is a dream opening for Harstem. But Harstem, you know, interesting. The other part here too is he's probably got some kind of thought process with how to deal with Elazer, and that's part of why he's been really passive. Are these going to be drop-a-lords? A lot of overlords will be moving. That kind of migration at this time of year is usually aggressive. There is Storm queued up there, and that Archon count's getting higher as this Infestation Pit starts to finish. And I'm like, maybe that's Hive, but maybe it's also Elazer has this tech against Harstem where he's like, the guy makes too many Archons, man.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something, like, once I saw that last game, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that is some way you defeat that. Because otherwise, you try and just remax on Ling Baneling or Roach Hydra or whatever, you're running up a literal brick wall. Like, it's not going to work. But those Infestors, allowing the Hydra range to really kick in was the perfect call. Now, it is for a Hive now, But I do wonder if he's thinking that, right? As he sees Harstem continue to be defensive and gets actually his own aggression here to maybe also test things out, see if he can find any openings. He's also going to find how many Archons are you making.
Which is a pretty normal amount for right now.
Yeah.
Storm's about to finish before this aggression. I think the important information that I believe Elazer got from going up that far was there's no 4th base yet, which is weird. Harstem is really hesitant to get these. Yeah, he actually unfortunately missed those force fields a little bit. Could have trapped that whole force, but didn't, but ended up getting it anyways, as it just doesn't go very far down here. It's a good fight for Mr. Harstem.
Yeah, it still ends up being pretty good. He's going to go ahead and chase that to the other side of the map now. It's kind of going to break off, but he should feel confident to continue pushing. There's no Baneling, so the risk of that, like, you know, just dangerous, deadly surround is a little less. Obviously, surround's still good for Zerg, but actually we have a bit of a run by looking to buy time as Harstem is completely out of position. Well, that's a lot of storms.
No,
he has 4.
No Stargate behind this. No Blink. And this Greater Spire is about to finish. This is that kind of classic Protoss position where you just forget about how fast a Zerg can get to Broodlord. Because if Harstem doesn't hit some kind of really important timing attack, which is kind of coming and going right now with how much time Elazer's buying here.
The Warp Prism's probably going to die, and that is deadly to an attack like this. Like Harstem actually getting full surrounded, and yeah, it is getting really weird. Charge lots running in without much support, not killing very much. Storm's coming from the back and the front, though. And that's actually really changed things around, but it's still all time buying, which is what Elazer's really looking for.
He does not care. Go ahead and kill these units. Obviously, they can't just straight up die for free because they are still expensive, and it looks like they will die. This back end unit will die essentially for free. They're diving as deep as they can. They're really buying as much time. But the bank of Elazer's not super great. Now, that being said, 18 more Hydras, some Roaches, and this Greater Spire has just straight up finished. There's the Stargates being added. Now, those are not Stargates in addition to the first one because there never was a first one. So there's no Fleet Beacon, and the Stargates don't get to make anything super meaningful for a while.
Yeah, that is... that's a problem, because usually the Fleet Beacon would be done already, and you'd be instantly into 3 Tempests, which would be great for this timing, but Elazer did still fear the counter, so it's not like he was saving up all his supply, all his money for those Broodlords. They're not on the way quite yet. It looks like it's going to be okay, especially because Harstem is threatening here, and Elazer has to take it seriously. Yeah,
and he has, right? He's made no Corruptors so far, just trying to hold on here. He's got some stacked defense behind this as well, so as long as he takes the proper position, he should be okay. Now, the danger here for Harstem, on the flip side, you lose this army, it's a very gas-heavy army, so maybe you get 2 or 3 Tempests out, but it would be like, oh, misclick there, I've done that. But it ends up being like, you've got 3 Tempests and then some Zealots. That's not really an army.
Yeah. He's finally broken through that really scary part of the middle of Automaton where you can be surrounded, like literally 360. And has actually gotten to a really nice area here where Elazer is going to struggle up against that many Archons, still a decent amount of storms. And here comes the Warp Prism.
He's baited out so many storms.
Yeah,
This army has, I think, 1, maybe 2.
Still a lot of High Templars that are regaining energy, but I mean, Elazer's going to try and fit in some Corruptors now. This is a very difficult spot for him to actually defend. In fact, could you just help kill that hatchery right there? So he's just going to have to give that up. That's not so bad. Maybe Broodlords are finishing, but it's still just that Roach Hydra army. He is dealing well with the harassment, but okay, this is probably the best move he could do. Forcing that recall. Harstem managed to fit everything in there, and he will be able to do... No, High Templars.
No, the Templar are by themselves. This is terrible.
Oh my god.
It's just gotten snapped wide open. He's going to pull back, but that means this army that... Oh, he could have fought there as well, I guess. The Elazer getting a little bit caught off guard. All the Templars!
No!
You hate to see it.
Oh, that was so much gas gone there. And I don't think he has many backup or any backup, so it's not like he has 1 or 2 storms in his pocket as his supply has dipped.
Yes. He's making a single Void Ray right now.
That's pretty desperate, because he didn't get the Fleet Beacon. So many things are going on. He probably saw maybe a win opportunity around that 5th base, or 4th base actually, but that was not the case. And now he's desperately trying to catch up, make sure he doesn't just die to Broodlords. But Elazer only has like 4, I think, right now, which isn't that deadly of an amount.
Well, it is when your only anti-air is a single Void Ray and 4 Archons. So behind this, Elazer's just regaining his 4th base. It's not like it's unicorns and rainbows and pastures of gold over here. He's in the tough spot as well. But if the 4 Broodlords get anchored by this army and they lay siege to that 4th base of Harstem, which is equally just as important, this game could end for Harstem in a really weird, scrappy way.
Well, luckily those Broodlords were also made across the map, so
Yeah.
they have taken like 30 seconds here, and maybe he has to give the 4th base, especially as he's being attacked by multiple situations here. Yeah, he's gonna. Looks like that 4th base is gone. Gonna pull the probes, just take this army down while he can, and continue waiting for those Tempests to deal with the Broodlords.
Gets the Templar pick as well. Laser all over the place on the small micro. This army's just shoving. Behind this is more Hydras and more Roaches, and that's the army of Harstem. I mean, yeah, he's going to have a Tempest or two. He's losing probes.
No,
I think it's going to be it here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, besides not having anything for what is still a small amount of Broodlords, but still like a decent amount of damage, he also doesn't have much for the ground army. Like, the supplies have really plummeted here for Harstem. He didn't have any splash. He never really got a lot of High Templars back with Storm, and he has to go up his own ramp to try and defend his natural.
Yeah, he lands the Dream Storm. The Hydra's just sat underneath it. The Tempest is going to begin to go to work on this, but the damage has already been done. That's the mothership. It's gone. The Natural's dead. The 4th is dead, and so is Harstem. He taps out 2-0 in favor of the Polish Zerg Elazer. Well done.
Well done, yeah. I feel like Harstem... I feel like he could have been more aggressive in this series, like in multiple ways, right? He maybe could have thrown in a cheese or a different, very aggressive opener, like an adept opener, but... instead it was very cautious. And then, as soon as he actually starts to show some movement, it's on this really unfortunate map where certainly one bad thing about Automaton for Protoss is that the middle of it is just, it's an instant surround. And a Laser with so many armies literally at times got a full surround. So that's always deadly, it's always dangerous, and Harstem was unable to also match the pacing of that game. It's a little bit worse.
Well, I see a lot of respect from Harstem in Elazer's play. Elazer's known to be the aggressive Zerg, and he's just been really putting in some work almost after each of these events that Elazer hasn't placed in the top 4. You've seen him have a very good mentality of saying, like, well, I'm going to put in a lot of work. I want to come back. I need to know what it feels like to win again. And you can kind of see that here. I think Harstem was thrown off a little bit about the mind games and trying to get Elazer off balance, but Elazer just seemed to be pretty rock steady. And nope, I defend, and then you either kill yourself off that attack or I push and kill you, I guess.
Yeah, well, that means that Harstem will be going down in the losers bracket to face off against Nurchio, which we already said is a pretty doable series for him.
Should be.
Nurchio kind of in this tough spot where he's really looking for redemption. I mean, he's not 2017 Nurchio anymore. And then, I thought they got reversed. No, it's correct.
Serral
and then
Laser.
It's Serral versus Elazer. So that will be the order of things. When we come back, it is Nurchio versus Harstem.